Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Transpicuous News, Part 2. I'm back again. We're going to do a little bit of a special report. Like I said, I kept it separate from the regular one, just for shits and giggles. Want to talk about, well, I said I was going to talk about it last week. Kind of glad I held off. The Temple of Baal. Oh, the archway of Baal, the Temple of Baal. It's been the whole topic of conversation. Again, another April 19th. April 19th. Bit going on. Everyone seems to think April 19th is going to be a big day. Some of us are going to kind of have some fun on that day, just to maybe counterspin some of what they think they're going to do. But I digress. Temple of Baal. Archway of Baal. And of course, it's been just gone gangbusters. Now, if you've been following what's going on, apparently there's been a change. Apparently there's been this radical change. Victory is at hand. Yes, oh, no, we don't need that. Hold on, sorry guys. There we go. Victory is apparently at hand. All the Christian groups in the US are talking about the fact of the archway from the Temple of Baal that was planned for New York City has been canceled. There's been a lot said about it. Oh, it's going up in Trafalgar Square, but it's not going to be the Archway of Baal now. No, they've changed it. Now it's going to be the Arch of Triumph. Pretty fucking interesting. First of all, if you do a simple search for the Arch of Triumph, pretty much the first 5 pages of Google search you get is the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, not an archway in Palmyra. I'm going to get into this story because this was on the Telegraph out of London. This has some very, very interesting pieces. And to go with this report, I'm actually going to copy and paste this entire article in with my highlights because there's some very, very pointed stuff that's said in this. And you can look at it and say, oh, they're contradicting themselves. Or are they? Or is it just the greater scheme of transparency coming out? So, apparently, the Archway of Baal is no longer going up in New York City yet. And it's no longer going up in Trafalgar Square yet. Now they've changed it. It is going to be the Arc of Triumph, also from Palmyra, purportedly destroyed or not, depending on which report you read, by ISIS when they came in and blew up everything in Palmyra. Like I said, this article, though, sheds some very interesting pieces of light on it. The first piece I want to talk about is that when you go and look for information about the Arc of Triumph, or the Arch of Triumph in Palmyra, there is nothing pre-October 4th, 2015 about this Arch of Triumph. Hi, Ham. Ham's coming. Our neighborhood kookaburra has decided to come and join me for the report, apparently. Just stay over there. You're not landing on my computer today. When you go looking for the information, when you go looking for, like, the UNESCO sites, and you go looking to try and find information about this purported Arch of Triumph, there is not a single mention of this thing that I can find prior to October 4th, 2015, when the mainstream media announced that ISIS had blown up the Arch of Triumph in Palmyra. Now, when you look at the older articles, when you look at the older things that were going on, the historical stuff, even Wikipedia, the UNESCO sites, you will get mention of a monumental arch. They talk about this monumental arch, which is at the very end of this over 1.5 kilometer colonnade. There's this monumental arch, but it's only ever called the monumental arch. It's never ever called the Arc de Triomphe. Until purportedly ISIS blew it up October 5th. Well, that's when the reports came out, 2015. And yet it was destroyed, but then it wasn't destroyed. And then they said it was destroyed, and yet even articles now can't seem to decide whether it was destroyed or not, or partially destroyed. So apparently they just don't know. Even though all the stuff was done, they took all the pictures, they've sent drones in to take footage, but apparently still no one can decide whether the Arch de Triomphe is destroyed, half destroyed, all destroyed, or not touched at all. Or even if it exists, which is the question I kind of have at this point. Which leads you to believe, okay, wait. Why would they invent this news story? Why name this? I mean, whenever an Arc of Triumph, whenever you hear this kind of stuff, what's in a name? A name, what's in a name? You know that's got to be something that's going to come back later on. So let's go take a look at this article. Because like I said, there's some real special pieces in here. Now, it's all about the history. It's all about they're making this Arc de Triomphe. It's going to be set up in Trafalgar Square in London, England. April 19th. So they're talking about how it's all being done. It's being done through digital. They're using basically, it's not 3D printing. It actually looks more like a CNC machine. That, if you know what that is, that taking a digital image and then carving solid pieces out, more so than obviously a 3D printer, which is what some people have tried to compare it to, which prints out something as a solid form. This is being carved more like a CNC machine. The monument in question is the Arc of Triumph of Palmyra, destroyed by ISIL forces when they spread across Syria in the summer of 2015. For the past keep note of this, for the past 2 months in a Rocky Mountain workshop right next to where Michelangelo quarried his finest marble, a new arch has been rising, and week after week, in a culminating flight of fancy, it will touch down, in the week after next, in a culminating flight of fancy, it will touch down in Trafalgar Square. Take note, it says that for the past 2 months in a mountain quarry, they've been working on building this archway, which up until 3 days ago was supposed to be the Arch of Baal, not the Arch of Triumph. So how did they build it for 2 months, carving all these intricate replications of all the carving and everything, and now all of a sudden they've changed their mind, and instead of the Arch of Baal, they're going to do the Arch of Triumph, when they've already been carving it for 2 months and it has to be ready next week? Do you see the technical difficulties perhaps going on? If you look at the pictures, and unfortunately I should have pulled them up, the difference between the Arch of Triumph and the Arch of Baal, very significant, is the Arch of Triumph is an arch, and the Archway of Baal is a flat-topped arch. They really don't look similar, if indeed they are the same thing or not. Who knows? This is where we come to this mess. Now, also note, they've been doing the carving in a quarry in Italy, which is in the province of Tuscany, in the Carrara workshop, or the Carrara. This is where Michelangelo cut all of his marble for his statues, like the famous statue of David. It says in the Carrara workshop, where it is being manufactured from 7 blocks of Egyptian marble. Wait. Why would you haul Egyptian marble? It would be interesting, kind of like if it was an Egyptian relic they were rebuilding, but it's not, it's Syrian. So they've hauled Egyptian marble from Egypt, taken them all the way to the quarry in Carrara, Tuscany, and they're carving it there? Huh? Anyone else kind of confused? Doesn't make much sense, does it? We are very happy to do this. Now, this is the co-owner of the Carrara workshop where this is taking place. We are very happy to do this, and we feel that it will be something that can change the history of what happens, he tells me. Kind of interesting past and present tense used in that sentence. If his syntax sounds chronologically confused, it is no more so than the Arch project itself, which takes the memory of a destroyed past and recreates it in physical form in the present, with an eye very much on the future. Again, can you say loaded fucking statement, especially as we're talking continuously about history, changing history, etc., etc. Yeah, very, very interesting statement. Now, the company, the organization that is supposedly, purportedly carving this arch, whichever one it is the Institute for Digital Archaeology, or the IDA, which in and of itself is a really interesting organization. And the whole article goes into a lot of information about what's going on, how they've collected all these pictures, the photos, and the digital archaeology, how it could change the world, and how a lot of archaeologists are not very pleased by what's going on and are, let's say, confused by the amount of manpower, money that's being put forward to digitally recreate archaeological finds. When the IDA revealed last December that it was intending to use the data and expertise to build not one but two replica Palmyra arches, notice it says Palmyra arches. No, the article at December 28th in The Guardian said the Arch of Baal, not the Arch of Triumph, to be unveiled simultaneously in Trafalgar Square in London and Times Square in New York, generated headlines across the world. Yeah, no shit, eh? Since there's been some backtracking on the original idea, there will be no simultaneously unveiling in New York. Okay, so again, let's go back and take a look at what they've just said. They started working on these arches, arches, plural, singular, hard to tell, 2 months ago. So were they working on both of them simultaneously, or were they just going to do one and then rush through the other one? Wait, and this, which, when they changed from doing the archway of Baal to the Arch of Triumph, there will be no simultaneously unveiling in New York. They may transport the London Arch there later, or build another one. Wait, you mean the one they obviously must have already started? Again, which one though? And the Palmyra Arch that's being reconstructed is no longer the entrance to the Temple of Baal. They used Baal instead of Baal because it's a little more whitewashy, which survived an attempt to blow it up in August 2015, but the Arch of Triumph, partially destroyed in October, formerly located at one end of the Great Colonnade. That would be the end of the Great Colonnade that opens up and leads to the Temple of Baal, by the way, just saying. It goes on and on about how they build it, how they've put stuff together. What I approve of is collecting and record and documenting vast numbers of sites. Tim Hall, reader of public archaeology at the University College of London, referring to the Million Images Database project. The replica arch is less to his liking or comprehension. It seems to me it's a bizarre expenditure of money, possibly worthy but misinformed aims to promote something which isn't a real past in an entirely reproduced form. And that, again, is a really interesting statement, which isn't a real past in an entirely reproduced form. And he says, I find it very odd, and yeah, I got some better uses for the damn money. Now it talks about the IDA. The IDA is a not-for-profit organization which describes itself on its website as a joint venture between Harvard, the University of Oxford, and the government of the UAE. United Arab Emirates government? The UAE provides funding only on a project-specific basis. But not only that, most of the IDA's money comes from private sources within the US. He confirmed an annual operating budget, including this year in manufacturing of the arch, of £2.5 million sterling, which is about $3.2 million, which is enough to make archaeologists on your average gig fall off their chairs. Archaeology, notoriously underfunded. $3 million for an archaeological project is a hell of a lot of money. And you go through and you just read this. They talk about the guy who set up this company, this organization, Has an academic background in the philology, the study of the sources of languages. Really interesting. And practices in the US as a prosecution lawyer who specializes in murder cases. An appellate work, and when we met, he was keen to emphasize his archaeological credentials despite having any formal qualifications. So this guy is a lawyer who studied the sources of language, which, given that he's a lawyer, is very, very interesting. And then he decided to take up digital archaeology and set this up. Huh. Now, we get into the whole thing about Baal. When I was originally going to do the project and do this report on Baal 2 weeks ago, I was going to dig right in and give you all the information about, let's look at the background of who Baal was, what he is, blah, blah, the Sumerian, the Assyrian, the Babylonian, etc. And it's been done to death. Everyone's been done. This really has been done. So I'm going to take it on fact that you guys have already done your homework. You know who Baal is, the god Baal, Marduk, El. You know all this shit. You got a question. The history. This is what we've been talking about on the round table, on the One People Round Table show. History right now is highly questionable. And for the past 2 weeks, I was going in and out of this rabbit hole here on the whole Baal stuff and Palmyra, which leads to a hell of a lot of other stuff. You realize that you have to question everything. And when you look at, for example, the history of Israel, history of Egypt, and all of a sudden you realize that, it's totally open to question. And none of this is proven. There is no proof that Israel ever existed as a nation, as a people. The whole exodus out of Egypt never happened. As far as the Egyptians are concerned, as far as anyone else is concerned, never happened. There's only biblical stories to back this up. And the whole timeline that has been created around Palmyra, which has really been pushed out by the media since the summer of 2015. They've created a timeline of all these things, like the Temple of Baal was not built until just over 100 AD. And you go, Temple of Baal? Why would they be building a Temple of Baal in 100 AD when Baal worship, biblically, if we want to talk biblically and we want to use that as a chronology, was, Babylonian? We're talking 600 BC. Why would they be building brand new temples to Baal in 100 AD? It doesn't make sense. And you start going down, like I said, the whole thing of history. And you look at Israel and the whole stories that we get, like Rome destroyed the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. And then mysteriously, somehow or other, you have this new temple of Baal gets built 20, 30 years after that in Syria and Palmyra. Now, Palmyra is also a city that is purportedly, biblically, was built by King Solomon, one of the great Israeli kings, purportedly. What is King Solomon known about is, of course, Solomon's Temple. Everyone's been looking for Solomon's Temple, haven't they? Oh, God, there's been how many movies about King Solomon's mines, King Solomon's temples, the Ark of the Covenant? Oh. I want to show you a picture. This, again, those things you go down a rabbit hole. I'm going to show you, apparently I've knocked it down. Here we go. Let me show you this picture. This is a representation or a recreation of an ancient temple. So is this one. Interesting. They're very, very similar. Very, very similar. And what's interesting is the fact that this is an artistic representation, or recreation, if you will, of the Temple of Baal. This one is the Temple of Jerusalem. It was purportedly destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. And so the questions. Why would they build a new temple of Baal just after 100 AD when Baal worship purportedly was like 600 BC? And if the Romans sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple and ran the Israelites out, you have to wonder why. All of a sudden you have a new temple being built in Syria that looks so similar. So similar. But here's a little piece that you might find interesting. When you go to Wikipedia and look up Baal, properly Baal, however you want to pronounce it, was a title and honorific meaning Lord. The Hebrew scriptures compiled and curated over a span of centuries include the early use of the term in reference to their God, Yahweh. Now this is like, this is Wikipedia. This isn't, some stretched out alternative, conspiracy theorist. I went and double checked a lot of this because I was kind of floored. The title Baal was a synonym in some contexts for the Hebrew Adon and Adonai, and is still used as an alias of the Lord of Israel, Yahweh. Temple of Baal, Temple of Jerusalem, city of Palmyra, purportedly built by King Solomon. There's a lot of different temples that were built in Palmyra. And all of them opens you up to a lot of questions about historical accuracy, shall we say. Now, the reason I'm doing this report today is because it just got better. Today, we have a new report. It just came out. Islamic State destroys a 2,000-year-old gate of God in Mosul. Sources in Mosul, Iraq have reported the Islamic State, ISS, ISIL, whatever, pick one, I don't care, used military equipment to destroy the ancient monument known as the Gate of God. The Gate of God, also known as the Mashki, I should say, the Mashki Gate, was built in the 7th century BC during the reign of the Assyrian king Sennacherib. Now, again, we go to the biblical. If you can use the biblical as a chronology. King Sennacherib, very, very famous king, biblically, all over the place. The Gate of God, Mosul. This comes down to the point of talking about some very interesting biblical stories again. Because when you talk about the Gate of God, you're not talking necessarily about something that's historically accurate, because the Gate of God is what was known as the Tower of Babel. Biblically, we're now Genesis. We're not even talking like King Solomon's time. We're talking way back biblically. The Tower of Babel was also known as the Gate of God. And it goes into the city of Nineveh and the city of Nimrud and all of these very, very ancient cities, which again opens things up very interestingly. Now, when you go and you look up Nineveh and you look up these purported gateways, which they're just saying one of them has been destroyed, the 5 gateways that have already been excavated in Nineveh, as you can see here on the picture over here. Let me see if I can pull that up a little better. Okay. The Mashiki gate right over here on the western front is translated as Gate of the Watering Places. Has nothing to do with the gateway to God. Nothing at all. And basically, they talk about it was perhaps used to take livestock to water from the river Tigris, which currently flows about 1.5 kilometers to the west. It has been reconstructed in fortified mud brick to the height of the top of the vaulted passageway. The Assyrian original may have been plastered and ornamented. Okay, so it's not even the original gateway. This is a reproduction of the gateway. And yet, we have this big article now, all of a sudden, oh, look at the roosters are all going off now. We have this big article all of a sudden about how the Islamic State has destroyed a 2,000-year-old gate. No, it would be about 2,700 years old. These guys first should work on their math. Secondly, it's not even 2,700 years old. It's brand spanking new. It was just rebuilt in the early 70s. So, and they're calling it the Gate of God, which it's never been known as. So we've caught them red-handed, changing the name. Kind of like the Ark of Triumph, which has never, ever been known as the Ark of Triumph. Basically, it's only ever been known as the Monumental Archway. How's this going to come into play? Because you know it is. You know, every time one of these little pieces comes up, how are they going to twist this one? What are they getting at? Why are they putting this in place now? Another archway, another gateway. Right at the exact same time, we're talking about the archway of Baal, the Arch of Triumph, all going into Trafalgar Square, maybe other cities around the world, maybe all on this significant date of April 19th, maybe. There's a whole lot to question on this stuff. And I mean, there's a whole lot to question. And if you're a researcher, you really like to dig for the truth, and you go down these rabbit holes, there's a lot of information out there. And there's a lot of information out there that very pointedly shows us that everything we've been told is a piece of bullshit. Especially when we look at the biblical stuff. And yet, we also know they love to turn these around. They, the quintessential they, love to turn these things around for their own agendas. So what's the agenda? Interesting. Baal, Yahweh, Zionism. Interesting stuff, folks. We live in interesting times. Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on it. And if I have anything new, I'll be back again. But that's it for now. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.